Good afternoon, and welcome to the Carolina Codecast, the official podcast of the Carolina Code Conference. With me today are Bruce and Maggie Tate. Say hello, guys.
Hello, Barry. This is the first time I've heard your podcast voice before.
This is Maggie.
I'm not really sure how to respond to that, but welcome both of you. So, thanks for coming on the show. So, introduce yourselves to the audience and kind of let us know what you're up to these days.
My name is Bruce, and I am an author in the programming languages space. Lately, I've been spending most of my time in Elixir, and I guess by lately, I mean the last 10 years or so.
Okay.
So it's a functional programming language, and it's one that I've been involved with since the pretty early stages. And we have a consulting and training company for Elixir. Mostly we do training, but we also do a little bit of virtual CTO work and things like that. So, yep, that's what we've been up to.
Okay. Maggie, how about you?
Sure. I'm Maggie. I am behind the scenes at Groxio. I do all the video editing and the communications and am the one of the planners for GigCityElixir, which is our conference on Elixir coming up in May.
All right. Good deal.
That might be the first time I've heard Maggie's podcast voice.
Nice. Well, I know y'all have met my wife Christy, and we're at some point going to start working some commercials into this. And I attempted to record them first before I recruited her, and they sound much better with her official commercial voice as well. So something else for people to look forward to on the podcast in the future. But anyway, I wanted to thank y'all for coming on the show. For those of you who haven't met Bruce and Maggie in person, they were at the Carolina Code Conference this past year. Bruce was our afternoon keynote speaker. Maggie was helping behind the scenes. And before the conference even got started this past year, as I was trying to figure out how to run a conference in the first place, spring of last year, after I took this thing over in March, I started just deciding to reach out to people who ran other conferences and just to see if they had any advice. And one of the first ones that I saw, because I'm also a big fan of the Elixir programming language, was GigCityElixir happening over in Chattanooga. And so I sent a note out, and within a very short period of time, Maggie responded and was happy to just hop on the phone and give me lots of advice about the experience of their conference, and invited both me and my wife up to see the conference, attend the conference, and volunteer behind the scenes to see how it all ran and came together. And that was an extremely valuable experience in helping to make sure that the Carolina Code Conference came together this past year. And then y'all were good enough to come down and help make it into a great event. And Maggie even volunteering as well to kind of help make sure everything ran smoothly on our side too. So thank you both for that. Thank you for all the graciousness and help that you've given along this way. Really appreciate it. But the conference happened this past August, of course, and you came up and you told Bruce, you told a story about a journey that y'all had, taking this incredible boat trip down the Mississippi River, out the Gulf of Mexico, up the Atlantic coast, back into the Great Lakes, and then back down the Mississippi River again, back to Tennessee, where you all started. And it was a really incredible journey. And I know I want to hear more about it, but would y'all like to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so it's funny. I still have to pinch myself. I don't really see myself, and we definitely don't see ourselves as adventurers in quite that way. But this is a big deal trip, right? There's so many logistics to handle. You have to be able to work on an engine. You have to be able to kind of get food to eat all the way around the loop. You have to be able to navigate in salt water and fresh water. And it's not a small amount of seamanship that you have to take on. And I want to say that 4 years before the trip, we had never heard of anything like the Great Loop, having kind of spent our professional time in Texas, which is pretty landlocked, right? And so I had a friend that was bringing this boat around from Florida, and he said, "Do you want to help me bring this boat up?" And I said, "Sure." and not knowing what I was getting into, and not knowing that there was even a water route from, up between Mississippi and Alabama. But we went through this canal system called the Tenton.
Okay.
And the Tenton has like 11 locks or something like that. There are 15 between the Gulf and Chattanooga. And as we were coming up, one person after another would say, "Are you a looper?" And I would, kind of smell myself and say, I don't think so. I would look around and kind of confused. And then when we got back to Austin, or to Chattanooga, we looked up this idea of a looper, and that took us to Great Loop. And then we fantasized about this trip for many years. And then I still don't believe that it was us taking the trip.
Wow. So I didn't get, the origin story of how the idea got planted in your head before. And so that's kind of cool to hear. Maybe that can give me and Christy a little bit of hope that maybe some of these trips that we've talked about for years that we've never been able to find a good chance to go on, maybe we'll be able to pull those off one day. So
you can do it. You can do it.
We'll see. It will not involve a boat journey quite like this. I'm not sure I could get her to sign up for that one. But so on this trip, I didn't actually even realize that from Chattanooga you could get out to the ocean. I didn't realize that there was a path to doing that, because I'm here in upstate South Carolina, and we've got a lot of lakes. There's 3 lakes around me, and the lakes are connected, but you can't travel from one lake to another because there's not a lock system that will allow it. So I just sort of assumed that any body of water that was near Chattanooga was going to be landlocked in some way before it got all the way out to the Mississippi and made its way down. And so you talked about this, the loopers. And so the loop is, in your words, what?
Why don't you take this one, Maggie?
Gosh, it was a big adventure for us. Part of the reason we did it when we did is because it was COVID, and we'd bought a pontoon during COVID, and that was fun. But that was really the only boating experience that I had.
Did you name it? I have to ask.
The pontoon? No, we didn't.
Okay.
Our kids wanted to name it the Yeet Yacht, but we said no. And so I felt like, it was kind of a dark time for us, and we were lonely and a little isolated, and thought I need something to look forward to. And so I read a book called From What Is to What If, and it was a fabulous book, but it kind of encourages the shifting of the mindset to, like, instead of saying all these reasons why you can't do something, just kind of lean into the idea of, what if you could? What would that look like? What would that feel like? And so I thought, well, I like boats. We kind of like this loop. Maybe we should think about that as something to look forward to. And I started reading another book, because I thought, well, if you're going to take this trip, you got to figure out some planning for it. So then I read the book called The Great Loop Experience, and our plan was sort of to do it in 4 years from maybe that time. That sounded reasonable, to find a boat and kind of practice and plan. And so I started reading What Is to What If in like end of July, and maybe the Great Loop Experience book in August. And we found a boat in September, bought it, and got it back to Chattanooga in October, and practiced, spent 100 hours on the engine, which is usually what people put on a boat in a season, right? So we did it in just a few months, and we left in January. So it was like a Shazam kind of trip. So for us, the loop was an opportunity to go out, to adventure, to work remotely, and to go meet people, and to just try something new.
Okay. And Barry, we almost wrecked that boat twice from the second that we put it in the water. I am not kidding you. They dropped this boat, they plop it in the water. And since it had come off of a trailer and it hadn't come out of one of the other marina slips, it was pointing back towards this kind of tight cove in this kind of small marina that's not made for bigger boats. Not that currently was a bigger boat, but So as we're even getting out of there, we had never driven anything other than a pontoon. And so they're dropping this 10,000-pound yacht off, and we're kind of looking at it, and it's 29 feet, but it's still heavier than anything we've been in. It's pontoon has this it's kind of an outboard setup so
Right.
that it's easy to point where you want to go. You point and it goes. And this boat wasn't that. And, we'd read on the internet, the authoritative boating guide.
We needed lessons.
Oh,
We were
my
so
goodness. And we didn't
unprepared.
have lessons. It said it's going to track well. It's going to go where you point it. Well, I didn't know. I expected to kind of push off and the boat to be going forward. But you're basically going to go in the direction that the rudder was the last time you pointed it somewhere, unless you decide where to go, right?
Yep.
And so, we started moving forward, and then we started turning as I'm finding the rudder, and I'm looking up and, expecting to hear "attaboy" from Maggie, and Maggie says, "Bruce, you're going to hit the dock. You're going to hit the dock. Unless you turn right now, you're going to hit the dock." And we did. It was just the tiniest, gentlest, like a little lipstick on the boat, little lipstick on the dock. There's still that little shiny blue area. And then, I'm kind of smiling and beaming, having made the first turn. And then Maggie, she leans in to tell me her congratulations. And she says, "Bruce, you're going to hit the yacht. You're going to hit the 47-foot yacht. You're going to hit the $10 million yacht."
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, my goodness, so I must have turned like seconds before we hit that thing. I turned into it and kind of goosed the throttle a little bit. And, I'm sure that if anybody was watching, they were just absolutely terrified and wondering what we were doing. But, we survived that first 20 minutes, and then that was probably the hardest 20 minutes on the boat.
I don't know, though. I don't know, because you got it parked in they had us dock in a slip that was for a houseboat. So it's like a runway, right? And so we're like, okay, we could get into that. We can do that. And then we docked and we're like, we got to go home. We can't do this. This was a terrible mistake. We
have made a terrible mistake.
This is not going to work.
Goodness. So, I mean, looking back at that, with all the hours that you put into the boat at this point, I mean, I'm sure you're both old pros at this by now. I mean, is it hard to look back at that and go, gosh, I made that a lot harder than it needed to be?
No, it's a hard thing. It's really genuinely a hard thing.
Okay.
And it's sometimes it is, it's logistically difficult. Like we were coming up the New Jersey shore, and there were these gale force storms just lined up like jets on the Atlanta tarmac, or like one after another. And we had to get up at when there was a little bit of window in the weather, and that meant that we were going out into stuff that wasn't optimal. And so you couldn't be out in the ocean the whole time, but the intercoastal waterway along the Jersey Shore is really shallow, like 4 feet when you have high tide and all the depth that you can get, and less when you don't.
Oh, wow.
And we had like a 2.5 foot draft, and still we're kicking up mud at some points. So there were days like that were really, really hard. There were days we both got COVID twice. And
on the boat. Oof.
One of the reasons that we did this trip was I thought that COVID was going to kill me. I had all these comorbidities. I had asthma and heart disease and all these other things. But yeah, it's genuinely a hard thing to do, and more people actually climb Mount Everest than do the Great Loop, and I understand why. It's really emotionally hard. It's physically hard, but it's so tremendously rewarding too.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. All right. So with the idea of crashing boats into stuff, you went from a pontoon, and I've been on pontoons. My dad used to have a pontoon when I was younger, and pontoons were great because, especially for lake life, because they're pretty much unsinkable. You've got these huge metal air-filled pontoons on either side of the boat that are virtually impenetrable. And so it doesn't matter how much it rains. You don't have to worry about leaving a drain plug out or something like that. The boat's pretty much unsinkable. So what was the hull made out of on something like this? Because that would have been my first concern, because you're always worried about bumping into something that could pierce it. Dope, are you muted?
So this was a fiberglass boat, and it had a pretty deep keel, and we had what was called protected harbor, so that our propeller didn't go all the way to the bottom, and the keel went under the propeller by a little bit, and the same thing for the rudder. And so it's a class of boats called a pocket tug or a pocket trawler. And the idea is that you make a yacht, and that should fit into 40 foot footprint, and you put it into like 27, 29 feet. So a lot of features, and then you can go a little bit faster when you want to.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there were times when we were running in places where it was significantly dangerous. Like when we left, the rivers were in near flood conditions until we got all the way out to the Gulf. And this was the dead of winter. And so when we were on the Tinton waterway, there was a time when we were kind of following a tow through, and the lockmaster didn't let the tow out at the scheduled time because he wanted to talk to them about safety, because someone had fallen out and almost died a couple of days before. And then a couple of days later, we were pulling into a town called Coffeyville, and there was a lock there. And we were like looking at this boat that looked like it was in a weird position, like the lock was full and it was way up there. And then we realized that the boat was in the parking lot, and it had sunk in the lock a couple of days before.
Oh, wow.
It had hit, it was a fiberglass hull like ours, a bigger boat that's presumably a lot beefier, and it had hit a log underway. And when it slowed down to get into the lock, the bilge pumps couldn't keep up anymore. And it was on the bottom and shut down the Tinton for like 1.5, 2 weeks.
Oh, wow. See, we don't have access to a lot of lock systems here. If any of y'all are listening and you haven't gotten a chance to go through a lock before, a lock is basically an area that has a wall on two sides, and they'll open the gate and you will drive your boat in, you'll dock it. They'll close the gate behind you. These huge metal gates, and you can usually fit a few boats in there. And then the water level will lower in this area. And then when you get to the bottom of wherever you're going, the other set of doors will open up and you'll proceed out. And it's a really cool experience if you've never gotten a chance to do it before. If you're in South Carolina, I know there's a lock system around Santee Cooper, down by the power plant down there. But we used to always go on that, go through that on scout trips as a kid.
Did it howl? Like some of the locks that we went through would make the creepiest noises as they would creak and groan and
they would do
shriek as the water would change.
Oh yeah, and it's terrifying when especially when you're down at the bottom of this, and there's just this gate holding all of this lake water back above. You just kind of looking up at it going, I really hope that doesn't open.
100%.
But
to give you the idea about the weight, so there are these things called lift locks, and it's nothing more than two bathtubs of water, one at the top, one at the bottom,
and
kind of next to each other.
You're talking about the one in Peterborough?
Yeah. And so there's a big cylinder that kind of collapses into the water and then kind of races up, so that when one is up, the other is down, and then they kind of switch. And the way that they're over 100 feet long each. So when there are 4 big boats in there, there's a ton of weight in boats. And so we asked them, how much power does it take to move this thing? And they said, no, Bruce, it's all with gravity. And we said, how much more water do you have to add to counterbalance when one of them is full? And they said, we don't have to add one drop. It's noise. All those big boats are noise. And you're just talking about 5 or 6 feet of water that they have. And you kind of multiply that by like 50 feet or something like that. It's a stunning amount of power.
Yeah, it's also really, it's always interesting to try to explain that, to understand the whole idea of water displacement and why something like an aircraft carrier can float and it doesn't just sink to the bottom immediately. Mm-hmm. That was always really hard for me to wrap my mind around as a kid. But it's really cool that we've got these type of engineering marvels to go through. And so, I mean, how many locks would you say you went through on this trip?
Oh,
all of them is not acceptable.
So I want to say, so there's 45 on the Rideau from Ottawa. There's 44. Well, the biggest number is 44. I don't remember whether they skipped a couple, but on the Trent Severn, that basically gets you around the Niagara Falls.
Okay.
And then there's probably 10-ish coming from Chicago down to about where we started. And then there's 15 from Chicago down to the coast. So, and then another 25 for the Champlain system, which gets you up to Montreal, and the Lake Champlain system, there are 12. So something like not quite 150, more than 100, something like that.
Wow. So you mentioned, going around Niagara Falls as part of that. Were you all able to like pull right up to Niagara Falls on your trip?
No. No. We weren't really that close to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just had to ask.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yes.
I know they do have boats that will go over there and like go behind the falls and stuff. It's part of your.
Yeah.
Guess what's it called? The lady of the
mist or
I
something.
remember.
Yeah.
The misty lady. Yes.
Didn't know if you'd have access to get back there on your trip, or if you cared.
Yeah, and
people did.
We missed the Erie Canal. We didn't get to do that one. That one would have really been cool. But we ended up going up the Hudson River to Lake Champlain instead of going west on the Erie.
So when you enter from the Atlantic side, when you're coming back in, at what point do you re-enter the coastline?
We came in through. You mean like through New York City? We came in through New York City.
Okay.
The Hudson River. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Good.
And the way it works is that you're along this. You're inside this set of barrier islands. So I would say that we were probably out at sea for 3 days total, and only overnight ever once. Mm-hmm. And so the way that you kind of measure this is, when we didn't know this when we started, but you go from freshwater to saltwater down in Mobile, Alabama, or somewhere it goes from fresh to brackish to kind of saltwater, and then you kind of make the opposite transition. And in New York, you go in and up the Hudson River, and the Hudson ends at a town, more or less at a town called Troy, and then there's this lock called Federal One, and Federal One is the first lock on the Erie Canal, and if you take a left, then it takes you to is it Lake Ontario? Is that right?
I think it's Lake Erie, right?
Lake Erie,
isn't it?
I don't know.
We didn't.
We didn't go that way.
Yeah,
we went the other way.
Because we came out to Ontario at Kingston.
Okay. Ontario.
Lake Ontario came out at Kingston.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
Yeah. And so, but you go, so if you go straight, you go up towards Lake Champlain, and then you go up from there to a this small canal system called the Champlain Canal, and that dumps you into this massive river system called the St. Lawrence Seaway, and then we went from there to Montreal.
Wow. So I may be geeking out a little bit too much on the boat trip part of this. I grew up on boats.
Uh-huh.
So I live in the upstate of South Carolina now, around Greenville, around the mountains and everything. And yes, there are lakes around here, but I grew up in Florence, South Carolina, which is about an hour from Myrtle Beach. Mm-hmm. And we grew up at the beach all the time, either deep sea fishing or boating around Santee or something like that. And so I've spent so much time on boats that, as much as I love the upstate, the only thing that I miss is the water.
Sure.
And so I love hearing about all these boat trips, and the idea of doing a long boat trip like this is something that's always fascinated me. And I joke with Christy that I'd love to just go live on a houseboat somewhere at some point. It seems like it'd be a lot of fun. But,
yeah, there's a really cool spot. You can you can do something fun like this and see part of it. People do it in sections. They don't often, people do it at their own pace. But there's this one section in Canada called the Rideau Canal, and you can rent a boat and go on it. And I think it would be the most accessible way to do part of the trip because you don't have to own the boat. It's a very lovely boat and it is very slow. So there's not any massive danger, right? And the canal system is phenomenal and the people are great. And I think it would be a beautiful way to try it.
And so you would start that at where does the
Ottawa.
Start
in Ottawa in Canada.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Just south, I believe. Yeah, it's cool. It's cool. There are these three bedroom massive yachts with 90 horsepower.
Yeah.
That sounds like a plan. That sounds like something
they call them Le Boat.
Yeah.
I think it means the boat.
Got Chris Farley references going through my head right now, so thanks for that.
Yeah.
We're going to get back on track with this, though. So we've got, let's see, what do we have? So y'all had a lot of travel. How long did it take you to do this entire trip?
9 months. We left January 15th and officially crossed our wake October 2nd-ish, and then got home about a week later. From that. Mm-hmm.
And while doing this, you were working remote the entire time?
We did.
So how'd you pull that off?
Bruce. Bruce hooked up a great system, and we had internet access just about everywhere we go because of this thing called a PepWave. PepWave? Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the choice everybody has to make is where are you with power consumption? And if you have a system where you can generate a lot of power, you have a lot of solar, you could basically generate the 120 that the Starlink takes, then you could use that system. Otherwise, you have to use smaller commercial modem-based systems. And there's this system called a PepWave. What's a PepWave modem, and it's called a Peplink system. And you basically take two SIM cards from a cell phone, you put them in this antenna, put it on the top of the mast, and that kind of sends it down to the modem. And then it stitches together the best signal across two providers. So it's a really cool system. And so we had fantastic. So when I worked on the loop, I was teaching, right? So these were Zoom classes. So we weren't away from shore, right? So this was all from marinas or, what have you, from city docks or whatever. And we would basically hook up this system. So we would need power, and we would need access to like decent AT&T or decent Verizon. And gosh, there might have been a handful of places that we didn't have internet that was great in the lower 48.
That's fantastic. I've never heard of the PepWave option because, I had somebody on the show recently who was talking about kind of going around the country on land and working remote out of like a camper, and he was using
It's the same problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And I've had the previous RV experience and everything, but we always had a really tough time in the RV finding good signals. But on the water, I would be really, really concerned to figure out how to pull that off without a satellite. And so it's interesting to hear that you can do that, and this PepWave option. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the lower 48, I want to say that we did not have great internet when. What would you say, Maggie? The Everglades and maybe a little bit of Alabama. Maybe 2 nights in Alabama.
Maybe 2 nights in Alabama, and the Everglades were in the middle of nowhere, and that was concerning for us because of the weather, right? Because you got a weather report when you went in where you were just like completely out of communication from anybody, and then just hoped that was still true as you were leaving to go down the rest of the way to Florida. But I think that was it. I think it was only just a couple of nights.
Yeah, we had 2 friends that did this in a boat called a Sea Dory, and they're 22 feet, very small, very, very low gunnels in the cockpit.
Okay.
And, they were getting absolutely hammered in the Everglades. They were talking about 4 4-foot waves in their anchorage.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't imagine doing that in a boat that size. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, the anchor systems are made so that as the winds are kind of pointing you the way that you need to go.
Right.
And if you're okay being a little bit uncomfortable, then you can handle some surprisingly big weather. Though we were never on the hook when big weather happened. One time, and I mean, we were in an anchorage that was so protected. We didn't have any problem at all with weather.
That's really, it's an interesting way to think about it too. And the size of the boat definitely affects a lot in terms of what you can handle. Mm-hmm. So, during COVID, we bought a boat also. Mm-hmm. And I, thinking, hey, we're going to get something that's small enough that we can put it on a trailer.
Yeah.
And we're just going to go put in at one of the lakes that are around here. Turned out literally everyone else had the exact same thought at the same time. Yes. You couldn't even find a ramp space to get in. It was shocking. But we bought a smaller boat. It was about I guess it was probably about maybe a 16 or 17 foot. And it was one of those Stingray kind of ski boats, but I'd never really had to think about hull design that much before this, but it had kind of almost a flat curvature shape. Mm-hmm. Every single wave you hit, it was just brutal. I mean, just little lake waves were just jarring.
Yeah.
And we ended up selling the boat specifically because of that, just because it was so almost painful to ride in it, and even the slightest wind.
Yeah.
But I've never had that experience on a boat before. Usually I get something that's, that'll cut right through the water. But
different people would have a different experience, right? So there were people in much bigger boats that just got the tar beat out of them. Mm. And if we had waves hitting us right on the nose, we'd like that because our boat would kind of would cut them up. And there were some of these big boats would have wanted to maximize the cabin space in the bow, and every now and then somebody would call us and say, "Oh, we think we've had enough. We're going in." We say, "No, I think we're good. We're going to try to push it a little bit and go another 40 miles." And they'd say, "What? Are you crazy?" And we're going a little faster and cutting the tops off the waves, and they're fine. And then 2 weeks later, they'd be calling, and the waves would be hitting them on the sides, and they'd say, "Oh, we have stabilizers. We're not feeling anything." And we'd say, "We're going in." We're calling it, Uncle.
A lot of trade-offs. So when you're saying you're calling people, you were doing this, in kind of like a convoy with other people, or were you just on like a CB radio that was, whoever happened to be around?
Yeah. So it's all VHF, which has excellent distance. And so normally on the Great Loop, you're traveling sometimes with other boats, though every day is you're kind of independent. And most of the time you're traveling by yourselves, and you might kind of watch a map, and with an app called Nebo, and you would see kind of the days run. These boats kind of come in at the same time, and you kind of call them and say, "Hey, let's get together for docktails." And you talk about all the mistakes you made that day, right? But sometimes, like for example, if the lock systems have a lot of volume thrown at them, well, the lock masters want to send all of the pleasure craft through at one time. So you try to really collect up and make it easy on them so that they kind of understand the Great Loop and the dynamics, and that they understand that you're working with them and not against them.
Okay. So about how long would you say y'all traveled in a given day, or most days on average? About how many hours?
So we probably, on long days, like when we were leaving, we were in January, we really wanted to get down to the coast. So we traveled from dawn to as far as we could go that night. So those were really long days. Other days, it'd be a couple hours, 4 hours, wouldn't you say? And then we ended up traveling kind of on average 1 out of every 3 days, because the trip, you don't want to just go, right? And you can't because of the weather. So sometimes you have to get stuck. And we spent a week in Pensacola because we were storm bound. We spent a week in Miami because we were storm bound. We spent a couple days in Carolina Beach because we were storm bound,
And the trip is kind of built so that it's built to take about a year. And ours would have taken a year, except, we kind of flew through Alabama. So that's really the one part of the trip that we shrunk down a little bit. But it's also built where you're in port 2 days and traveling 1. And there are places on the loop where you might travel, for example, in the mornings, and really you don't want to be out in the afternoons. Like on the Great Lakes, you want to wake up as early as you can, kind of, and there's the turnover on the marinas all happens at, I don't know, around 10 or 11 o'clock, depending on where you are. And so you kind of want to get there when space frees up. And really it's, if the weather is bad and you had planned to leave, it was okay because nobody could get in there behind you. Right. So you run a day's worth and then you kind of, pull into a spot, call the marina, and then that your boating day is over and your tourist day begins, or your work day, depending on what you're doing.
Okay. And so do you have to plan these marina stops in advance, or do you just show up and claim what you get?
You do a little bit in advance, ish, right? Okay. So you kind of, as you're planning, you kind of hold it loosely, right? Like you wake up in the morning, the weather looks good, you're going to go. You always have earlier bail point, right? If things don't go as well as you expect them to go, you kind of have an idea. If you need to stop the trip, you can go off to that place. We would select a location probably a day or two in advance, thinking, yes, this looks good, we're going to get here. I'd call them. Because we had a small boat, we had a Ranger tug. I don't think we said this. We had a Ranger tug, R29. So it's 33 overall. So for the loop, that's kind of on the smallish end of and half. So they always had room for us, right? We had a shallow draft. We were only a 10-foot beam. We could call the marina in the morning and say, hey, we're coming in. And they're like, I don't know. How big are you? And we kind of tell them what we are. And they're like, sure, come on. We got room.
Right. So we'd have these conversations. We'd be traveling with just all these big monsters, right? And the monsters would say, oh, we can't get in. And then we call the marina and they'd say, oh, we can't get you in. And then we say, no room for a 29-footer. And then, kind of have like a little silence. And they'd say, how wide are you? And they'd say, just 10 feet. And then another silence, and they're starting to move around a little bit. And then they say, how deep are you? We say 2.5 feet. And by then they're dancing, right? They're like, come on, we'll put you somewhere.
Nice. See, that's pretty similar to the RV stuff. If you have to have, if you're in a Class A RV, you need to be less than 35 feet. And then you can fit in almost anywhere. There will be a spot for you almost anywhere. If you go any bigger than that, you're going to be really limited on your options. All right. And so what was the name of the boat?
Currently. Yeah.
Currently.
We named her Currently because we wanted to really pay attention to the trip, kind of just be present. And also because we live on the Tennessee River with the currents. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. So I could legitimately talk to y'all about this all day, but I know there's other stuff we definitely want to get to. So y'all, along this journey, I know you documented the journey quite a bit, and I believe you put it into a book. And Maggie, I think I just saw recently you also put it into a photography show.
I did. Yeah, that was fun. So Bruce came home from the trip and just wrote. And we had kept a blog during the trip, but at some point people started saying you really need to have a book like this. And so we kind of stopped documenting as publicly with the blog, and Bruce kept notes, and he came home and wrote. And so, the book came out December 15th in the ebook format and is now available in the paperback format too. So you can get it
for just a week.
For just a week. We're so excited. I had a friend send a photo of their copy when it came in the mail. So that was pretty awesome.
Nice. So you can do hardback as well?
Paperback. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Paperback. And then you can get it at Prague. And,
all right.
Yep. And then I did do an art show. That was really fun. It was really fun to take some of the photos that I had taken, and then we printed them all in metal, and it was up for about a month. That was really gratifying to see that. It was beautiful.
A lot of the photos in the book as well.
There are. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, great. I've been looking forward to getting my copy when it came out.
Good.
So
Thanks.
I didn't want to just get the ebook version though. I wanted the hard copy of it, so I can put it up here. Next to Bruce's other book that I've got on my shelf right here. I've got the 7 Languages in 7 Weeks back here.
Perfect.
And so so we could legitimately talk about the book and the travel all day long, but I do want to get to some of the other things. And so I know y'all mentioned that we started out talking about you having the GigCityElixir Conference that you invited us up to in Chattanooga last year, and I know y'all are very, very involved with the Elixir community in general. So talk to me about the GigCityElixir Conference, how that kind of got started, and what your vision is for this, and what people can expect.
Bruce, you should talk about how it got started.
Yeah, so how it got started, the long version of the short version. Let's do the medium version.
There we go. We'll go the medium.
So
version.
at the time, we were doing a mentoring group in Chattanooga. And so the idea is, and nobody wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'd like to do a conference, because
Except
conferences because conferences are a pain. I mean, they're a lot of work, and it's they're a ton of logistics. It's a little bit of a thankless job. But and by the way, thank you, Barry, for what you do. It's really important for your community, and that's why we support you as much as we can. Right?
I appreciate that.
So,
one side effect I've seen to this is that there seems to be almost a network of people who run conferences who are happy to support each other for that reason. And it's been an interesting side effect I've seen from doing this. But
especially the small ones, they tend to be they tend to be about embracing the community, embracing causes, and for us, it's a cause. We are really into the idea that that coding communities should look like the world, right? So we really try to support people who aren't like us, and so our mentoring group is for underrepresented, and we try not to say exactly what that means and let the attendees define what that is, and we try to be really open with it, so you could be underrepresented or bring somebody who is. And so as we were talking about this and thinking about this, we said, wouldn't it be cool to have some of the best programmers in the world come to Chattanooga, and then we could just sit the mentees and the potential mentors around a table and start fires, right? And then somebody looked at me and says, Bruce, you live in Chattanooga now. So how are you going to attract people to come to Chattanooga? So anyway, had this idea, tabled it for a while. And so Maggie had been stalking this one couple. She's laughing because she swears it wasn't stalking, but I can promise you it was. Looked them up in a magazine, said, oh, this is furniture that I have that they have that I want to see. They look like interesting people, and just invited herself over to a party.
Okay, they were neighbors. It's not like they were random.
Subject to interpretation.
Right.
Subject to, I'll allow it. So anyway, Maggie did her relationship jujitsu. And so we found ourselves and having drinks with the Garrisons, and so I mentioned John Hughes to this man Steve Garrison, and he stood up like a bird dog, and then just determined, just went down the stairs, came up with this bottle of bourbon. He said, "You have to get this to John Hughes," because his son had an award-winning bourbon and had heard about John Hughes. So I'm wondering how this happened, and I'm staring at this bottle of bourbon on my living room table saying, well, now I have to do a conference, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I said, John, I know you haven't seen me forever. And he's one of the creators of the Haskell programming language.
Okay.
And just really one of my heroes. And I'd met him once at a conference and just embarrassed myself as a fanboy. And but he was very gracious and very kind, and invited me to come to Gothenburg to talk to his students. And I never got to do it, but I said, "Hey, interesting story. I have this bottle of bourbon from an award-winning bourbon manufacturer. I could drop it in the mail, but what fun would that be? So come to our conference. And he did. And so when he signed up, I said, hey, we know Dave Thomas. And so, don't repeat yourself. One of the original signatories of the Agile Manifesto, and author of Pragmatic Programmer, the creator of just a very good friend. So he said, yeah, I'd love to come. And so he came, and Stu Halloway of Closure fame, he decided to come, and on. Chris McCord came, and just one person after another signed up to come to this conference. And so that's how we got started. It was an invitation, like a stalking, met an invitation to drinks, met an international invitation by bourbon. And so I'd never heard that story before, but that's our story.
Goodness gracious. All right. So I have to ask, just because it applies to me, what kind of bourbon was it?
This is Garrison Brothers.
It's a distillery.
It's actually
a distillery in High Texas.
Okay.
And you're just laughing. You're just laughing right now, because there cannot be bourbon if it's not Bourbon County, which is not technically true. So what they've done is they have this absurdly long list of requirements that make it prohibitive to distill bourbon anywhere but Bourbon County. And they did all of these things. And when they actually had their first year, they said, well, we have to use these barrels. We have to use, only these strains of rye, like all these rules. And they satisfied them all and said, let's do this in Texas. And they did. And then the first year they were outside and they heard a pop. It was because there was more, there's more pressure differential in Texas because of the sun, because of the heat and the cold. And the whole first year exploded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And so they had to rebuild their barrels, and they used the thicker barrels, and they sourced them from some winemaker.
I don't even remember what the rest of it was. Yeah.
But anyway, so later on, they got their first taster, and they told the taster, this is a big deal for us. We don't know if we're going to make it. We had this first batch, and the taster, measures the sugar concentration and just shakes his head. They said, what's up? And he says, well, this isn't right. You're going to have to redo it. And he said, this should be excellent bourbon. He says, well, if this was accurate, you would have a whiskey of the year. And they did. Mm-hmm. Right? Because the pressure had pushed the bourbon in and out of the cask many more times. The sugar was exactly right, because they had a good team. And the Garrison Brothers, the one you want but probably can't get, is called Cowboy Bourbon.
Cowboy. Okay.
And I know I have absolutely butchered the story.
Oh, it's okay.
You should look it up. You should read about it.
I'm not an expert by any means, but I am somebody who appreciates good bourbon.
Yes.
And when we had Charles Nutter on here recently, he also talked a little bit about that. We learned about one called Jefferson Ocean that they actually take on a boat.
Yes.
Which it seems like y'all should know about.
Right. I've heard of that one. Yeah. Rocking it back and forth.
Voyage 24 of Jefferson Ocean. It's good stuff.
Yes. And it was good?
It was wonderful. It was wonderful. Yes. I was very happy with the recommendation. I never even heard of it before, but I found it in my local Total Wine over here. And cool. I ran the name through some other friends of mine who are kind of aficionados, and
cool.
And they reinforced the quality for me before I made a purchase.
Okay, good.
I will keep an eye out for that. All right.
Yeah.
Enough with the bourbon pieces. So talk about we were on GigCityElixir. Mm-hmm. What's coming up for this year? What's new this year, and what are the dates? What do you have planned?
So one of our favorite conferences is Code Beam, which is an Elixir Erlang conference that's in San Francisco, and okay. I get to do a keynote there, which is wonderful for me because I haven't been for a good long while. We haven't been since before COVID. That was the last conference I attended before everything shut down hard.
Yeah.
I mean, So I jumped on a plane. There was maybe 80% full, which is a little bit lighter than this leg from Atlanta to San Francisco usually was. And then by the time I came home, I would guess that it was about a third full, and the country was shutting down.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going to be really nice. And there's also, we have GigCityElixir in May, but there's also a conference, an Elixir conference in Africa. It is a safari conference.
Really?
And it's by one of our dear friends, Sigu Magwa. So they're putting it on, and Maggie is actually on that program committee.
Okay. Now, was he at the conference last year?
Yes,
he was.
Yes.
Okay. I thought I remembered. I thought I remembered him speaking.
Yep.
It's hard not to remember Sigu. He has this wonderful rolling voice with a beautiful accent, and he just oozes kindness, and it's good to see good things happen to him.
Yep. It was a very, very memorable experience. The hearing him describe the constraints that you're working with in his part of the country or in his part of the world was really eye opening. And I can't remember. I don't want to butcher it, so I'm not going to go down that road. But it was just really, it was a really eye opening experience hearing him kind of describe several of the factors that are involved that a lot of us probably don't think about in a given day. So that's really cool. So you're involved with getting that up and running
just
this year.
More a little bit of like doing what I did with y'all, just kind of talking, encouraging. This is how it worked for us. This is what we did, and then just making whatever kind of contacts for them that I can help with. Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, bringing Sigu to Chattanooga, that was really
fun.
big.
Yeah, that was fun.
Nice.
And so, and I think that when people see a conference that's built around hospitality, it changes them, and it changed Sigu. And so I remember having the conversation on. We have this old steamboat that is kind of more of a burger bar now, right? It's called the Southern Belle.
Okay.
And so we were talking to him after this renovation that they had, and he was saying, "Well, we're not going to be able to get enough Africans to come." And I said, "Well, you don't have to anchor it with Africans. You can anchor it with Europeans. You have something that they want, and that's a safari. That's the experience. That's the hospitality and the people." You have low prices and a flight between Nairobi, Kenya, and most of the major airports in Europe is quite affordable.
That's really cool. That's a really interesting experience. That's I'm going to have to keep that on my list for future visits. So do you have an open call for speakers for GigCityElixir right now?
We do not. We are close to set with the speakers that we've got, which is great. And I think you've asked what the dates were. It's going to be May 10th and 11th for the conference, but we're doing something special this year. We're coordinating with NervesConf, and Ted Rezadek is coming and is going to run NervesConf on May 9th.
Todd.
Did I say Ted? Oh my gosh, Todd. Can you edit that? Okay, let me start over. Oh my gosh. Where'd that even come from? Thank you. So Todd Rezadek is doing NervesConf with us in Chattanooga, which is super exciting. So that will be May 9th. And then Gig City Training Day is also May 9th. And we have two trainings that we're going to be doing, one by Andrew Eck and Ruth Eck. They're going to be talking about teaching and the best practices of teaching people coding. And then Zach Daniel and Josh Price are going to be teaching about training about the ASH framework. So we're pretty excited about having those.
Nice. Well, so
ASH is pretty cool. ASH is about imagining code as kind of, if you describe the way the pieces hang together, most of the code base can be derived.
Okay.
And so it's almost configuration as code instead of the other way around. Right. So you configure your application and derive as much as you can, and then kind of fill in the rest. And it's a really powerful visualization that has to do with domain-driven modeling, which looks very different in a functional programming language than it does with object-oriented languages.
What would you say is the main difference?
There's just more power to derive and have a clean flow of control through the system.
Okay, interesting. Now that definitely sounds like Hash sounds a lot like something that I would like, because even back in my early days doing Java and PHP back in the early 2000s, I always started everything with designing the database first and then kind of going outward from there. And at one point, I even built a not open source, but a PHP framework to sort of automate that entire process of generating the rest of my application from the database design. So I'll have to check that out. And so you mentioned NervesConf right ahead of ElixirConf. For our listeners who aren't familiar with Nerves, can you give kind of a quick overview of what that's about?
Bruce, you probably should do that one.
Nerves is just Elixir for the Internet of Things. And it does things like the build process. It has a flow of control. It has failover for these devices. It helps to basically allow developers to build on hardware like our MacBooks and Linux workstations, and then deploy those to Raspberry Pis and BeagleBones and other commercial hardware.
Okay. All right. Good deal. So, I know we're getting close to time, but I am curious. I know we've talked about your giant loop trip, and we've got. I assume you're going to the conference in Africa this year as well.
We are.
Any other major travel coming up? I mean, are you going to space or?
Go ahead, Maggie.
We don't have anything other than that really planned.
September.
Bruce is going to Brazil. Are you going someplace else?
No, but we are as a family.
Oh, yeah, we do have a big thing on the radar. Yeah, our daughter's getting married.
Oh, congratulations.
So our youngest daughter's getting married, and we are going up to the San Juan Island, and they'll get married up there. It's a very small wedding. So we're going to spend a little bit of time up there, and that will be fun. Mm-hmm.
Great. Well, it sounds like everything's going great for y'all. Yeah. I know you've got a busy year ahead. Can't wait to get the book. I'll do my best to include as many links to everything y'all talked about today in the show notes. Great. Anything else y'all want to close out with?
Just if you got to see the talk last year and you would like to read about the experience, Currently Away can be purchased at the Pragmatic Bookshelf or on Amazon. And we'd love to see a review if you like it, or even if you don't.
All right. I'll include links to both options.
Good. And I'll send you the link for GigCityElixir, so you can have that up there too.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate y'all coming on the show today. It was great having you. Good luck with everything this year, and I look forward to getting up to GigCityElixir at some point soon. Hopefully this year. Great. Fingers crossed. We've actually got a little bit of a busy year coming up ourselves, though, so we're gonna figure out how it goes.
Good. That sounds great. Thanks, Barry.
All right. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
This has been the Carolina Codecast.